Something strange is happening to you. At first, it felt like a moment of clarity, a sudden awareness, as if a fog that had surrounded your mind for years quietly dissolved overnight. Conversations that once seemed normal now feel strangely transparent. Words carry hidden meanings. Smiles reveal subtle tensions. Silence begins to speak louder than speech. You start noticing patterns no one else appears to notice. Why one person always interrupts another. Why someone praises you publicly but undermines you privately. Why kindness sometimes carries a quiet expectation of control. None of this is obvious to others, yet to you it feels undeniable. And the most unsettling part is this: the more you see, the less comfortable you feel. Because this clarity does not make you feel superior. It makes you feel dangerous. Not dangerous in the physical sense, but dangerous to illusions. Dangerous to narratives that people unconsciously depend on in order to feel safe about themselves and the world around them. You are beginning to realize something disturbing. The world functions through a delicate web of unspoken agreements. Agreements to ignore certain truths. Families ignore them. Workplaces ignore them. Friendships ignore them. These silent contracts hold society together. And once you begin seeing through them, something irreversible happens. You cannot return to the blindness that made life simple. The threshold of dangerous wisdom. Psychologist Carl Jung spent decades studying individuals who had undergone deep psychological transformation. Many of them had confronted their inner darkness, what Jung famously called the shadow. They had examined their fears, their hidden desires, their contradictions, their capacity for both cruelty and compassion. But Jung noticed something unexpected. After this inner work, many people did not immediately find peace. Instead, they entered a strange and unsettling phase, a phase Jung associated with an ancient idea, Sophia, the Greek word for wisdom, but not ordinary wisdom, dangerous wisdom. This stage did not arrive through study or spiritual ambition. It emerged naturally as a consequence of deep self-awareness. Once someone truly sees their own shadow, something changes permanently in the way they see others. The illusions that once protected perception begin to dissolve. Suddenly, human behavior becomes painfully transparent. You see insecurity hidden behind arrogance, fear disguised as love, manipulation dressed as generosity, control masked as concern. You see the subtle power dynamics inside every interaction. And the most unsettling realization is this: none of it is unusual. This is simply how human psychology operates. When social life begins to feel like theater, imagine sitting in a conversation with someone you've known for years. They begin telling a story about their struggles. Before, you might have listened sympathetically, but now something new happens. You notice how carefully the story is constructed. You see the moments where details are emphasized to portray them as a victim. You notice the parts they leave out. You sense the emotional cues meant to influence how you respond. They are not lying, but they are unconsciously shaping reality in a way that protects their identity. For the first time, you recognize something profound. Everyone does this. Every person carries an internal narrative designed to preserve a certain image of themselves. Hero, victim, martyr, misunderstood genius, protector. These identities are rarely questioned because they stabilize the ego. But once you begin seeing the narratives being constructed in real time, conversations start feeling different, almost like watching actors perform a script they do not realize they are reading from. The hidden architecture of human systems. This clarity does not stop at individual behavior. Soon you begin seeing patterns in groups. Family gatherings suddenly reveal invisible roles that have existed for decades. There is the one who must always succeed, the one who absorbs blame, the one who keeps the peace, the one who rebels. Without realizing it, every family unconsciously distributes psychological roles. These roles maintain balance within the system, even when the system itself is dysfunctional. The same phenomenon appears in workplaces. A meeting is happening. Words are polite. Everyone speaks professionally. But beneath the surface, another conversation unfolds. Someone subtly challenges authority. Someone carefully protects their position. Someone attempts to build alliances. Power moves silently through body language, timing, tone, and implication. Once your perception sharpens, you begin noticing this invisible chessboard everywhere. not because you are suspicious, but because the patterns become impossible to ignore. The burden of two realities. At this stage, something exhausting begins to happen. You start living in two worlds simultaneously. There is the surface world, the one everyone else sees, and then there is the psychological world beneath it, the world of hidden motivations, emotional defenses, and unconscious fears. When someone compliments you, you hear the words, but you also sense whether it comes from admiration, obligation, envy, or strategy. When someone apologizes, you hear the apology, but you also notice whether it carries genuine accountability or subtle self-protection. You are constantly interpreting multiple layers of meaning at once. This mental process is automatic. You cannot switch it off. And while it sharpens your awareness, it also creates a quiet fatigue. Because interacting with people now requires navigating a depth that most others do not even realize exists. The moment wisdom becomes dangerous. Jung observed that individuals entering this stage often feel deeply confused, not because their perceptions are inaccurate, but because they suddenly feel disconnected from the social fabric that once felt natural. They begin asking questions like, "Hey, why does everyone pretend not to notice these dynamics? Why do people get angry when I point out obvious truths? Why does honesty make others uncomfortable?" The answer is unsettling. Most people are not ready to see the psychological machinery behind their own behavior. These unconscious mechanisms protect identity and emotional stability. Expose them too abruptly and people feel attacked, even if you are simply describing reality. This is why dangerous wisdom becomes socially disruptive, not because it is wrong, but because it removes the protective illusions people rely on. The first real consequence. Jung noticed that once this stage begins, something else inevitably follows. Isolation, not necessarily physical isolation, though that sometimes happens, but psychological distance. You begin realizing that many conversations operate on levels of awareness that you can no longer fully participate in. Small talk feels hollow. Performative politeness feels exhausting. Unspoken tensions feel louder than the words being spoken. You are still present with people, but part of you stands slightly outside the interaction, observing, watching, understanding, and slowly the question emerges, what do you do with this sight? Because seeing clearly creates a dilemma that most people never have to face. If you speak the truth you see, you risk alienating others. If you stay silent, you risk betraying your own perception. And this is exactly the crisis Jung believed defined the beginning of the Sophia stage, a stage where wisdom no longer feels peaceful. It feels volatile, unstable, almost dangerous. And according to Jung, this stage introduces 3 psychological traps that destroy many people who enter it. Once the veil lifts and you begin seeing human behavior with unsettling clarity, a quiet transformation begins inside you. At first, it feels empowering. You notice patterns others miss. You understand motives before they are spoken. You sense tension beneath polite conversations. But this heightened perception comes with a cost few people anticipate. Because once you begin seeing the psychological architecture beneath human interaction, you inevitably face a question that most people never encounter. What do you do with what you see? This is where the true danger of the Sophia stage begins. According to Carl Jung, individuals who reach this level of psychological clarity often fall into one of 3 traps, not because they are weak, but because dangerous wisdom demands an almost impossible balance. Without that balance, insight becomes a burden that slowly reshapes the personality. Jung observed 3 common outcomes: isolation, martyrdom, or corruption. Each begins with the same thing, the inability to reconcile truth with belonging. Trap 1, the isolation of the seer. The first danger is the quietest one. Isolation? At first, you attempt to share what you see. Maybe you gently point out patterns in a friend's relationship. Maybe you question the unspoken power games happening at work. Maybe you highlight contradictions in someone's story. You do this not to judge, but to clarify, to help. Yet the reactions you receive begin to teach you something uncomfortable. People do not welcome insight when it threatens their identity. Instead of curiosity, you encounter resistance, defensiveness, sometimes even hostility. The truth you speak feels to them like accusation. because most individuals maintain psychological stability through carefully constructed narratives about themselves. When those narratives are challenged, even indirectly, the ego reacts instinctively, not with reflection, but with protection. So over time, something subtle happens. You begin speaking less. You stop pointing out patterns. You hold your observations privately, not because you doubt them, but because you recognize the emotional cost of sharing them. Gradually, conversations start to feel shallow. Surface-level exchanges dominate daily life. Meanwhile, inside your mind, you continue noticing deeper dynamics everywhere. This creates a peculiar experience, living among people while feeling mentally separate from them. Jung saw this happen repeatedly. Individuals who developed deep psychological awareness often withdrew from social life, not necessarily by choice, but because ordinary interaction began to feel exhausting. Imagine watching a play where every actor forgets they are performing. They fully believe their role is real. Now imagine being the only person in the audience who knows it is theater. Participating becomes complicated, because acknowledging the performance would disrupt the entire production. So many individuals simply step away from the stage altogether. They retreat into solitude. And at first, the solitude feels peaceful, but eventually another danger appears: bitterness. Because wisdom that cannot be shared begins to stagnate. What once felt like clarity slowly transforms into quiet cynicism. You begin seeing humanity not with compassion but with disappointment. And this is where the second trap emerges. Trap 2, the martyr of truth. Some people react to dangerous wisdom in the opposite way. Instead of withdrawing, they become crusaders. They believe their insight must be shared, must be spoken, must be revealed. They begin confronting illusions wherever they find them, challenging hypocrisy, exposing hidden motives, refusing to participate in collective denial. At first, this path feels noble. After all, truth matters. Authenticity matters. Why should illusions remain unchallenged? But Jung noticed something troubling about this approach. Societies rarely reward those who expose uncomfortable truths. Instead, they punish them. The person who reveals hidden dynamics quickly becomes labeled negative, difficult, disruptive, troublemaker. It does not matter whether their observations are accurate. What matters is that they disturb the social equilibrium. Groups depend on shared blind spots to maintain harmony. The person who constantly highlights those blind spots threatens that harmony, and so the group instinctively neutralizes them. Sometimes through ridicule, sometimes through exclusion, sometimes through subtle character assassination. The truth-teller becomes the problem. Over time, the crusader often loses relationships, opportunities, and community. And eventually, a painful realization appears. People cannot be forced into awareness. They can only arrive there themselves. Jung believed many individuals in the Sophia stage destroy their lives trying to wake people who are not ready to awaken. They sacrifice everything for truth, and the world rarely thanks them for it. Because truth delivered without timing becomes violence. Awareness forced upon someone prematurely becomes humiliation. So the martyr of truth eventually burns out, exhausted, disillusioned, alone. But there is an even darker possibility, one Jung considered the most dangerous outcome of all. Trap 3, the corruption of insight. When someone learns to see deeply into human psychology, they acquire a powerful ability. They understand insecurity, desire, fear, status anxiety, loneliness, all the hidden emotional forces that guide human behavior. This knowledge can be used compassionately or strategically. Some individuals eventually realize something tempting. If you understand people's hidden motivations, you can influence them with subtlety, with precision, almost effortlessly. You know which words will trigger admiration, which compliments will dissolve resistance, which insecurities can be gently activated to guide someone's decisions. You see emotional leverage points others cannot see. And if that knowledge is used selfishly, something dangerous emerges. Manipulation without detection. Jung encountered individuals who began their journey seeking truth and self-awareness. But over time, their insight became a tool of control. They learned to shape perceptions, to guide conversations, to orchestrate outcomes, all while appearing thoughtful and perceptive. Externally, they looked wise. Internally, they had become predators of psychology. This is what Jung warned about: Clarity without ethics becomes exploitation, because when you see the unconscious patterns guiding others, you gain the ability to quietly exploit them. And the terrifying part is how easy it is to justify. You tell yourself you are simply being strategic, realistic, pragmatic. You convince yourself everyone else is already playing the game unconsciously. You are just playing it consciously. But slowly something inside erodes. Your insight stops serving understanding. It begins serving advantage. Your perception sharpens, but your compassion weakens. Eventually, you become the very shadow you once learned to recognize. And this, Jung believed, was the final corruption of the Sophia stage. Not ignorance, but weaponized wisdom, the impossible balance. These three traps reveal the central paradox of dangerous wisdom. If you withdraw completely, you become isolated. If you confront everyone, you become a martyr. If you exploit your insight, you become corrupted. Each path distorts the gift of perception in a different way, which raises the deeper question, is there a fourth path? A way to see clearly without abandoning humanity, without attacking it, and without exploiting it? Jung believed the answer existed, but very few people develop the psychological maturity required to walk it, because that path requires something far more difficult than speaking truth or hiding it. It requires learning when to speak, when to remain silent, and when simply to understand. In the final part, we will explore Jung's solution to the Sophia crisis, the rare psychological discipline that allows someone to carry dangerous wisdom without being destroyed by it. After studying countless individuals who reached the stage of dangerous wisdom, Carl Jung came to a sobering realization. Most people who arrive at this level of psychological clarity struggle to remain balanced. The insight itself is not the problem. The problem is what the mind does with that insight. Some people retreat from the world entirely. Others burn themselves out trying to wake everyone around them. And some quietly learn to use their perception for power. But Jung noticed that a small number of individuals navigated the Sophia stage differently. They did not abandon their clarity, yet they were not consumed by it either. They learned something far more difficult than discovering truth. They learned how to carry truth without letting it dominate their humanity. This, Jung believed, was the real test of wisdom, not discovering hidden patterns, but learning how to live with them. The art of holding insight without weaponizing it. One of the most surprising lessons Jung discovered was this: not every truth needs to be spoken. This idea sounds simple, but it contradicts a deeply rooted belief many people carry. The belief that honesty must always be immediate and absolute. But psychological truth operates differently. Human beings develop awareness in stages, and forcing someone to confront a truth they are not ready for rarely creates growth. More often, it creates resistance. Jung observed that individuals who successfully navigated the Sophia stage developed something he called discriminating wisdom. This meant learning to ask 3 questions before speaking what they saw. Is this person ready to hear this? Will this truth actually help them grow? Or will it simply create unnecessary damage? Sometimes the most compassionate action was not confrontation. It was patience, because awareness forced upon someone prematurely can feel like humiliation. It strips away psychological defenses before the person has developed the strength to face what lies beneath them. This is why Jung believed wisdom required restraint. Seeing clearly did not mean exposing everything. Sometimes it meant simply understanding, quietly, living in 2 worlds without losing yourself. People who mature through the Sophia stage eventually learn to function within 2 levels of reality at the same time. There is the visible level of interaction, conversations, politeness, social rituals, and beneath it exists the psychological layer, motives, insecurities, power dynamics, emotional defenses. Early in the journey, this dual perception can feel overwhelming. It creates constant analysis, constant interpretation. But with time and practice, something changes. You learn that you do not have to react to everything you see. You can simply observe it, like watching weather patterns move across the sky. Clouds appear. Storms form. Winds shift. But you do not need to control them. You simply understand them. This subtle shift transforms wisdom from a burden into a quiet form of awareness. You still see the dynamics, but you are no longer compelled to constantly respond to them. The return of compassion. Another transformation begins to happen once the intensity of early insight settles. Compassion returns. Not sentimental compassion, not naive optimism, but a deeper understanding of human limitation. When you see the psychological machinery guiding behavior, you begin realizing something humbling. Most people are not consciously manipulative. They are unconsciously protective. They construct narratives to survive emotionally. They avoid certain truths because confronting them would destabilize their identity. Blindness is rarely chosen deliberately. It is often the mind's way of maintaining balance. Recognizing this dissolves the temptation to judge others harshly. Instead of seeing foolishness, you begin seeing fragility. Instead of seeing deception, you see self-preservation. And this changes how you relate to people. You stop expecting universal awareness. You begin appreciating the courage required for even small moments of honesty. The quiet role of the conscious helper. Jung noticed something else about individuals who matured through the Sophia stage. They rarely became loud teachers or public philosophers. They did not seek large audiences. They did not constantly lecture others about hidden truths. Instead, they operated quietly, in specific moments, with specific people. Someone might approach them with a genuine question, a personal crisis, a moment of confusion, and in that moment, they would offer exactly the insight needed, not more, not less. Sometimes it was a single question, sometimes a small reflection, sometimes simply listening in a way that helped the other person recognize their own blind spots. This is what Jung described as becoming a conscious helper. Not a prophet, not a guru, just someone capable of seeing clearly and offering perspective when it is truly needed. These individuals trusted something important. Awareness cannot be forced, but it can be invited. The hidden maintenance of wisdom. Another challenge of dangerous insight is rarely discussed. Seeing deeply into human psychology produces emotional residue. You begin absorbing the hidden tensions around you. You notice unresolved conflicts, suppressed anger, unspoken resentment. Without realizing it, you carry fragments of other people's emotional worlds. Jung emphasized that individuals with heightened perception must learn to process what they absorb. Otherwise, the insight becomes heavy. Toxic. This is why many psychologically aware individuals develop private rituals. Writing, article, time alone in nature, meditation, physical activity, creative expression. These practices allow the mind to release the psychological material it continuously gathers. Without this release, insight accumulates like pressure, eventually turning into cynicism or exhaustion. Wisdom, Jung believed, must flow, not stagnate, continuing the inner work. Perhaps the most important lesson Jung offered about the Sophia stage was this: wisdom is not a final destination. It is a continuous process. The moment someone believes they have fully understood human nature, their insight begins to decay. Because the human psyche is endlessly complex, new layers of shadow appear, new blind spots reveal themselves. Even the most perceptive person remains partially unconscious. Those who navigate the Sophia stage successfully understand this. They remain students of their own mind. They continue examining their motivations, questioning their assumptions, confronting new aspects of their shadow. This humility protects them from the most subtle danger of all: arrogance disguised as insight, the real test of dangerous wisdom. Eventually, the chaos of early awareness settles. The feeling of alienation softens, and a new equilibrium emerges. You still see what others often miss, but it no longer isolates you, because you understand something essential. Human beings do not need perfect clarity to live meaningful lives. They need enough awareness to grow gradually, and that growth happens at different speeds for everyone. The real test of dangerous wisdom is not intellectual brilliance. It is psychological maturity. Can you see manipulation without becoming manipulative? Can you recognize illusion without becoming cynical? Can you understand darkness without losing compassion? These questions define the final transformation of the Sophia stage. The choice that remains. If you have begun experiencing this deeper form of perception, there is something important to understand. Your sight will not disappear. Once the mind learns to recognize psychological patterns, it rarely forgets them. The real choice is not whether you will keep this awareness. You will, The real choice is what kind of person this awareness will shape you into. You can allow it to isolate you. You can weaponize it, or you can learn to carry it quietly, with discipline, with patience, with humility. Because dangerous wisdom does not exist to separate you from humanity. Its purpose is far more subtle. It allows you to walk through the world with open eyes, seeing both the shadows and the fragile beauty within human nature. And when held with maturity, that clarity does not make you dangerous. It makes you something far rarer, someone who understands the darkness, yet still chooses to remain human.